No more hidden verdicts, no more secrets solved. Every voice is a weapon, every story be told. Innocent till proven guilty, that's our final decree. Under this constitution we stand forever free. Phoenix in the dawn, truth ignites the sky. Together we stand tall, no more asking why.
Oh, happy Monday. Happy Monday. It is Monday, right? It's been one of those days all day long, folks. And welcome in to Phoenix Talks. I'm Phoenix, and we are going to talk. So grab a chair, come sit down, grab a coffee or a drink, an iced tea, an Arnold Palmer, whatever your choice is, and let's chit-chat. Now, tonight, I am heavily relying on the chat. This is going to be a very fun, interactive, hidden secrets exposed in the Idaho 4 via police reports. Now, I'm just going to welcome you all in. Hey, Caleb, welcome in. Critic, good to see you. Did I miss another live? No, you did not. Good afternoon. I'm the first. Whoop, whoop. All right. Right. Thought I saw a post. I missed a live. Nope, you just got here in time. There was a video I did upload, which will actually be a part of this stream. So I'll get to that video in a minute. I've got a lot today. Hey, Patty, OG in the house. Hi, Karen. Welcome in. Good to see you. Hello, Amanda B. Shout out. It is Amanda's birthday today. Whoop, whoop. Happy birthday, Amanda. Hopefully your day will end better. I will say that. Holly, good to see you. Les, welcome in everyone. Welcome each other in. Hey, Misinformation. And Monique, good to see you. Stuart, hello, hello. I love your little picture. It says Spurs fan. And it is back to football season. I know college ball is very important to a lot of people here. And with that being said, college ball, you got a lot of players on the team, kind of like in the Idaho 4. Let me just get comfy here in my little comfy chair, because I've got a lot going on. Boy, do I ever. So how many of you have seen the new video that I released? I'm getting a lot of controversy over this, and that is the question, the unthinkable video, which I'm going to have more for you in a follow-up video. So keep watching for the drop of the question, the unthinkable Idaho 4. And I know a lot of you are like, he didn't plant the sheath. He didn't plant the sheath. I know he didn't plant the sheath. And that's the reason I did that video. I want people to start thinking for themselves, not what the media has told us, not what the DNA has told us, but basically what we've been told. I want you to think outside the echo chamber, okay? A lot of people got it, but some people didn't. But it got you thinking, right? And that was the goal. Begin thinking on your own. You must have missed that part. Yeah, so basically I showed you the route that was said that he took. And I showed you, I didn't show you the cell phone portion yet. I just said basically the route that he took. And this is a really good topic to get into right now, because I think people need to see this. People definitely need to see this. So I'm going to share this with you. Let me remove this. And I'm going to share it a little bit bigger so that you guys can see it bigger. So they were giving us clues all along, if you've been reading the documents and comprehending. Now, we have no proof that anyone else delivered this sheath. No factual proof. And when I say that, I say it with full integrity, because if it is in fact Brian Koberger's sheath, how did it get there? If it is in fact his DNA, but not his sheath, how did it get there? two options. A witness can testify he was at the scene of the crime, or a witness can testify he was not at the scene of the crime. Now, if he's not at the scene of the crime and it is his DNA and is his sheath, how did it get there? Two individuals would only know the answer. The individual who used the weapon with the sheath, or Bryan Kohberger. And we know Bryan Kohberger hasn't spoke. In this state's motion of limine, let me just make this a little bigger. The prosecutor's office basically filed this on 2/21/25. And they said, now comes the state of Idaho, we respectfully move the court in limine, that means to limit for an order prohibiting the defendant from offering alternative perpetrator. And then it goes on to say yada, 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 yada. Okay? Talking about an individual other than the accused committed the crime. Now, fast forward to today, we know that Bryan Kohberger's DNA is nowhere in the house that we are aware of, and it was not on any of the bodies. So we can almost factually eliminate him from being inside that house. Now, however, how did his sheath, if in fact it is his, how did it get in the house? Did somebody borrow it? Did somebody steal it? Did somebody take it out of his car? Was it pawned at the local pawn shop? What proof do we have of any of these scenarios? What proof? We don't, other than rumors and hearsay. The only two individuals that would know is Bryan Kohberger, once again, who's not speaking, and or the individual who committed these crimes. Now, what the state was trying to say, and did say very clearly in this document, it said, the Idaho Supreme Court stated, if the defendant proffers evidence, which proposes or gives or produces evidence, which merely tends to mislead the jury that another person committed the crime, or the evidence is not relevant because it does not tend to make the defendant's involvement more profitable or less probable, then it's within the court, in the trial's court discretion, to find evidence inadmissible. So basically, he was saying, there's no evidence that I did this crime. You have clearly, I'll show you in 1 second. Clearly, they had DNA of individuals that could have committed these crimes or been near these individuals, or in fact touch their person, their body, and left contact or touch DNA. Okay? And then they go on to say yada, yada, yada. Okay, we got it. Now, in the reply, we've read several times. I'm not going to read that reply again. But in another document I'd love to share with you right now, which brings us to the alibi, and the reason I made that video, now that we know he was factually driving, we know that it could possibly be his sheath. And in the Latah County Prosecutor's Office on 2/21, the same day, guys, same day that they offered the alternative perpetrator, they basically wanted the state's motion in limine regarding Bryan Kohberger's alibi. Okay? And what they said is that on May 23, 2023, we requested the discovery disclosure for an alibi. We demanded it, and we didn't have it. And then we filed a motion to compel. Give me the evidence, defense team. Mr. Koberger, give me your alibi. And then on the 23rd of August, that same year, the defendant stated an objection to the motion to compel motive for an alibi and bar certain evidence. There is a manuscript of this court document right here. Okay? There's a manuscript. Transcript, not a manuscript, a transcript. And basically, they stated in this partial transcript, it's not the full one, it's just a partial. The court hearing to alibi was preceded, obviously, Judge sat over the court in Latah County. And they offered a so-called alibi, not really an alibi. Well, does anybody remember the alibi that Koberger gave on the night of these atrocious murders? Does anyone remember what they said? How did they connect the two? Well, the defense basically said, and I don't know how the media got this wrong, he was stargazing. Okay? That's the one that we were fed. We were fed he was at the park stargazing. That's what we were fed. And this is why it's important to read the evidence and the documents. Now, if you go by exactly what was said, we have to go down to the transcripts of the court hearing. This is an excerpt of an alibi. Okay? And it says, so the next motion to compel notice of alibi of defense, Mr. Thompson. Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. And Judge, since the filing of our motion looking at the defendant's response, it looks like we've made a little bit of progress. The defendant has at least, Mr. Koberger, has at least now stated that his alibi is he was out driving around that night. He was out driving around that night. Are we all on the same page now? Because I know a lot of you were wondering, why did she make a video like that? Was it his sheath? Why would he plant it? Okay, here. The defendant, at least Mr. Koberger, has stated that his alibi is he was out driving that night. He wasn't stargazing. He was driving. And they got him driving. That didn't mean he committed the crime. Was he driving and didn't know that a crime was going to be committed? Don't know. But he was driving. And he says he was out driving that night. We already knew that. Well, how did they know that? They tracked his vehicle like I showed you in my video. If you've not seen that video, let's review it together so everybody has an idea of what I'm speaking about. If you are new here, welcome in. We are going over the evidence. We are looking at all the hidden secrets because there are a ton of hidden secrets. So let me share this. This is the actual video that I played, that I loaded. Let's listen.
Sold. Every voice is a weapon. Every story be told. Innocent till proven guilty. That's our final decree. Under this Constitution, we stand forever free. Phoenix in the dawn. Truth ignites the sky. Together we stand tall. No more asking why.
Happy evening, folks. Let me fast forward this too. You know, it's kind of been a wild sequence number 136. Let's get into it together. So this document is like creme de la creme. When you look at this document and you think, how in the world was Koberger's information and cell phone search warrant disseminated. I'm at a loss for words. I'm perplexed, because when I share this with you, you're going to be mind blown. When I say that, I don't say that too lightly, because when you start reading this narrative by no other than Brett Payne, you know, I want to believe our police departments are not corrupt. I want to believe that we still have some integrity, good oath takers out there, because I've read through this document before and something triggered me to go back and look at this investigation portion of it. Because he says, as part of the investigation, an extensive search, commonly referred in law enforcement as video canvas, was concluded in the area of King Road. This video canvas was to obtain any footage from the early morning hours of November 13th, 2022, in the area of the King Road residence and surrounding neighborhoods in an effort to locate suspects vehicle. So suspects, more than one, vehicles, more than one, traveling to or leaving from the King Road residence. Now, I want you to keep in mind, I have said that the unaliving, these horrific murders, were between the hours of 3:30 and almost 4 o'clock. And I go into a little bit of detail in my lives explaining this timeline that I have based on actual facts. Now, in this report, it says this video canvas resulted in the collection of numerous surveillance videos in the area from both residential and business addresses. I've received numerous videos that were collected and had conversations with other MPD officers, ISB detectives, and FBI agents that are similarly reviewing footage that was obtained. So they all got together, they all sat down, he talked to all of them, and they came up with this one conclusion. A review camera footage indicated that a white sedan, thereafter, suspect one, that we've seen over and over and over again, was observed traveling westbound in the blank block of Indian Hills Drive in Moscow at approximately 3:26 a.m. Westbound on Steiner Avenue at Idaho State Highway 95 in Moscow, approximately at 3:28 a.m. Well, let's look into see where that actually is located. Now, in order to understand Moscow and the way that this is worded, let's just zoom in and follow the MPD sequence 136 review. So it says that suspect vehicle 1 was traveling westbound in the blank block of Indian Hills Drive. So in order to be on this side of town, this is where I'm going to zoom in and show you, this individual had to either come from this area all the way down here, and I'm going to zoom in to show you where Indian Hills comes in, which is right here, Indian Hills Drive. So from this side of the state, this side of the town, Indian Hills Parkway comes all the way up, and it comes around to Steiner Avenue. And it said that at 3:26 westbound on Steiner Avenue at Highway 95. This is Highway 95 right here, and this is Steiner Avenue right here. So when you think about it, it says approximately at 3:28. Right here is 3:28. On this video, it appeared that suspect vehicle 1 was not displaying a front license plate, nor did it appear that the vehicle had fog lights on the lower portion of the front bumper, based off video obtained at the SM located at ... redacted. However, SM, I'm just going to guess maybe there's a Steiner Mart there or something. There's the Valley Smoke, Glass, and Vape. But if it's on this corner, there has to be some type of gas station or a video that was captured crossing South Main Street from Steiner Avenue right here to Lauder Avenue going westbound. So it says a review of the footage from multiple videos obtained from King Road neighborhoods showed multiple sightings of suspect 1 starting at 3:29 a.m. and ending at 4:20 a.m. So that's almost about an hour, give or take. Okay, now stay with me here. If you take a look at this map, Lauder Avenue runs into Taylor Avenue. It goes all the way around into Taylor Avenue. And then from Taylor Avenue, obviously it goes into King Road over here, Linda Lane, and Queen Road right here. This is where 1122 Queen Road is. Now, if you take a look at this document that I shared with you on the MPD 136, you'll also see something quite of interest. Now it says that suspect number 1 passes by the 1122 King Road residence and then leaves via Walenta Drive. Well, Walenta Drive is on the other side of the town, which I'll show you. And if you look, Walenta Drive goes into here. It can go either one of two ways. It can go back out this way to Paradise Road, which goes back to Lauder, which goes that way. Okay. But the document again states this, that the vehicle is traveling in a residential neighborhood off of where very limited number of vehicles travel that area during the morning hours. Upon review of the video, there are only a few cars that enter and exit the area during this time frame. Suspect 1 can be seen entering the area of a fourth time approximately at 4:04. So where are they going all the way back to Walenta that they keep going back to King? Well, it has been suspected that that was actually the undercover car, alleged. But let me offer you a different theory here. It says that the car can be seen eastbound on King Road. All right, this is eastbound on King Road right here. And it could be stopping and turning around in front of Queen Road. You can see it right here. I'll zoom in for you. Right here. So when you see that, they're saying suspect number 1 is in front of the King Road residence, right? It's Queen Road. And then it appeared to unsuccessfully attempt to park and turn around in the road, which we see from Dateline and the Statesman releasing the footage. The vehicle then continued to unsuccessfully attempt, but then continued to the intersection of Queen and King, where it can be seen completing a 3-point turn and then driving eastbound down Queen again. This is eastbound. Okay. And then it goes on to say that the suspect vehicle 1 is seen departing the area and at approximately 4:20 at a high rate of speed. Suspect 1 is next observed traveling southbound on Walenta, which down here. All right, I'm going to stop it right there, and we're going to go back into this camera right here. This says 3:30:25. And if you remember, I guess maybe he can be 2 places at once, unless, of course, I mean, the speed limit must be 35 in that area. And if they saw him at 3:28 in another location, is it possible that they're 2 alike cars? Or is Koberger in 2 separate locations at one time? Is that places? Can be 2 places concurrently. Okay, so if you can grasp this concept that perhaps one of these vehicles is not Koberger's, which one do you think it might be? Is he really over on the other side of town, or is he in this neighborhood? Which one? Yeah, I know the cop said he circled the neighborhood 3 times, but it didn't say specifically what times. And the cop couldn't be here. Again, the cop couldn't be in this video because they were taking care of another call at the same time. Remember that. He can drive 2 cars at one time. He's a ninja. Remember that. Yeah, right. Okay, Gypsy, that's a good one. So, if this is not the undercover cop car, and this is not Koberger, then whose car is this? I feel like this is like an ABC your way out question. If Koberger is on the other side of town right now, I don't think he could have got there in like lickety split at 35 miles an hour. And if this is not the cop car, then whose is this? Unless, Caleb, you have a fabulous point. Unless this time was manipulated, because it looks to me like, and we've showed you this before, how easy it is to put a timestamp on any video. This is possible. I always thought it was the DoorDash driver. There's 3 possibilities, right? So let's watch this for a little bit. Now that, my friends, is not, I'll repeat, in my humble opinion, does not sound like a Hyundai Elantra. What do y'all think? Drop a 1 if you agree with me that it does not sound like a Hyundai Elantra. All right? Because they're going to let you listen to it again. And then they're going to let you listen to it once again because they're claiming that this is the same exact car. It sounds to me like a truck, in my humble opinion. And here it comes back from Melissa. Here it is again. And it sounds to me like a tricked out luxury car, guys. That's what it sounds like to me. Okay, so there's a little bit of that. And I think, in my humble opinion, it looks like a SUV. And they go back out Walenta Drive. Now, do you think that that vehicle coming in and out is the same vehicle every single time? Here comes the vehicle once again on Walenta. And now they're saying it's the DoorDash driver that sounds like the same exact vehicle. The DoorDash driver at 3:46. And the DoorDash driver is there for a while. And another car coming that does not turn into this area. Okay, so you kind of get an idea of where I'm going, hopefully. If you don't, hang tight. So in going back to my video, let's watch. Turn around and south, and then it goes into the neighborhood at the Palouse River Drive of, I think it's Conestoga. So here is Conestoga. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit more so you can see. So this is the Paradise, and then down here is the actual location. So Walenta, and then it goes, I guess, I don't know how it gets in between there because it just says Walenta. And then Palouse River Drive is the southern edge of Moscow into Whitman County, Washington. So it's on Walenta Drive, based on my knowledge of the area and review of camera footage in the neighborhood that does not show suspect 1 during that time frame. I believe that suspect 1 likely exited the neighborhood at the Palouse River Drive. Well, if you look at what they're saying, if he exited Palouse River Drive, this is Walenta, and they say that it's going in this way, then this has to be, where's the Palouse River Drive? Where is it? Because it's all the way down here. Palouse River Drive. It doesn't even flow into there. So what road? I mean, did he just disappear for a little while? And then it doesn't say, other than they don't really pick him back up. So I'm a little confused. I'm totally confused. I mean, maybe somebody can help me out with this one, but I don't see how this road, other than it drops out here, and then he exited and went back this way. That's the only thing I can think of. So looking at this document, it said he continued on, and that the yada, 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 FBI was involved, and the examiners had 35 years in law enforcement experience with 12 years at the FBI. But it's after reviewing numerous observations of suspect 1, the forensic examiner initially believed that the suspect vehicle 1 was a 2011 to a 2013 Hyundai Elantra. Upon further review, it could be actually a 2011 to a 2016 Hyundai Elantra. But here's my whole thought process in this. I'm looking at this and I'm thinking to myself, if a car like his was in the area, had that been eliminated? Because I keep going back to this whole DNA on the knife sheath, and I'm just not making a connection here. And I'm thinking, how many other people are just baffled if, in fact, that is his DNA on the knife sheath, on the sheath itself. And if, this is by far a stretch, if Kohberger was sent in to that address to leave a knife sheath, if, this is so off the chart, because what do? I question the unthinkable. And the unthinkable for me right now would be, how would Kohberger's DNA get on a knife sheath, on the snap, the button snap, which we know that the odds are very low. But what if Kohberger was sent in to that address to leave the sheath? And on the way out, Dylan saw him. And he told her, allegedly, I'm here to help you. What if he didn't commit the crime that we all know about? But what if he was asked to go and leave the sheath with his DNA to cover up who did this? And that is why we see an 8-hour delay. This is why we see a 2.5, almost 3-year delay in trial, because they knew Kohberger was factually innocent. And they needed to buy time, because the real perpetrators will never be legally caught. That is the only thing in my mind that makes that connection. And I know this is probably going to be so outrageous for anybody to consider. Maybe he is the patsy. Maybe he is the fall guy. Maybe we'll never find out what really happened. But they needed someone to take the fall. And perhaps, just a long shot, that was factually his vehicle, trying to find the location to leave the sheath. That is the only way his DNA could have been there, placed there by him. This is a far stretch, a far cry, but that's the only thing that comes to my mind when I look at all these documents again. Drop your comments. He's still factually innocent, but they may have needed, allegedly, someone to take the fall. Okay, so that was the video that I made that's caused this big old uproar because of the fact that you follow the car. It may not have been an option, but I got you guys thinking about what we've seen so far. What if he is the fall guy? What if he agreed to this? What if they needed to cover this up because they didn't know who it was? That was the whole goal, was to get people start thinking, how could his DNA be on a knife sheath? If the knife sheath is here, his, how did it get there if he was not there? Okay, this was just a thought process. Now, here's the red flag. This is the document that they were fighting back and forth for an alibi. And he stated that his alibi was he was out driving that night. So factually, his defense has said he was out driving that night. So was he in the area? Was that his vehicle? Because I just showed you that it wasn't the police vehicle. The undercover vehicle couldn't have been there. They were over dealing with Hayden Villa, the sign guy. That was not the undercover cop car, people. And if it wasn't Kohberger because he was seen on the other side of town, whose car could that have been? Don't break your brain over this, guys. I'm showing step by step. Okay? So if we've eliminated it from being the undercover cop car, which everybody keeps saying it's the cops, they're so crooked. No, take a step back. Use your logic. They were at another call at that time. They pulled away from the Banfield footage on Taylor Avenue at 3:19 a.m. It's not the cops going through the so-called neighborhood at 3:30 something. Okay? Now, Could it be that his alibi was just he was driving around that night? Absolutely. He's telling the truth. Check. Fact check that one. And then Thompson, Mr. Thompson comes back and says, we already knew that. But if that's his alibi, so be it. Okay? And he says what the defendant has still failed to do is to comply with the Idaho Court of Rules that specifically requires a defendant to identify the names of witnesses who will be called to support his alibi. Well, who was he in the car with? Anyone? And you have to bring their addresses. The defendant has only said, well, I may do that, or I may call witnesses, or I'll do it through cross-examination. And of course, I have the right to testify on my own behalf. This was the second time I've read that he would be willing to testify on his own behalf. And then he says, we don't question that. At this late date, I do not believe it will be possible, even if the defense were to provide a list of the names and witness and addresses today, that with everything else that needs to be done leading to a week before October 2nd, that there is any way that the state would reasonably be expected to respond as contemplated by the rules and the statute. So it's the state's position at this point is we will accept that the defendant has said that he was out driving around. Although he should specify where he was driving. If he's not going to call anybody else, if he's not going to offer evidence from anybody other than himself, then that's none of our business. So we are willing to accept that with an order from this court prohibiting the defense from offering third-party evidence, whether by direct or cross-examination, in support of the defendant's claimed alibi. So the state just basically said, okay, we've played hardball. We're just going to have to accept your claim that you were out driving. So be it. But if he wants to testify to that, that's his prerogative, because the goal is to get him up on the stand and grill him. But at this point, it's too late for the defense to comply with the statute and identify specific people and their addresses who would testify. They wanted to give up his sources. If anybody was in the car, anybody could witness him being somewhere. So that's where we stand now, Judge. Thank you. The court, all right, thank you. What do I do, Miss Taylor? It's me, Judge. The court, all right. Your Honor, this is Miss Taylor. We have provided the prosecutor with what we can provide to the prosecutor and more. I think Mr. Thompson is right. We don't have to tell the prosecutor if Brian is going to testify or what Brian might say. We have indicated that it'd be possible that would have any additional things that might come out through the expert testimony on cross-examination of the state's expert. I don't have any documentation to give that to the state today. I'm not going to get into more about it at this moment. So October 2nd it is. We'll definitely understand that. And I've heard everybody's thoughts and concerns, but I get that. But I mean, this is what we have. And when there is more, I'll provide it. Of course, Thompson has something to say about the statute and the rules and the U.S. Supreme Court, Taylor versus Williams, and an alibi can be fabricated. Okay. Right there. Bill Thompson knows that an alibi can be fabricated by anyone, even his own witnesses he was going to bring to court that would testify that the defense could question about their own alibis. There's a tit for tat going on, right? And he says the defense is waiting to gather up evidence, seeing that they can fabricate to match the evidence. He just called her out, said that his client was lying, even though he said, I was out driving. If they caught him out driving, he was out driving, folks. If anything, he's guilty of being out driving and then admit in court, I was out driving. Right? And then he goes on to say, oh, by the way, here is our alibi now. That is specifically what is prohibited by the statute, the rule, by the comments of the Supreme Court. End of recording. And they just go on to say something about, another case and yada, yada, yada. I was just like, you've got to be kidding me. The judge refused to allow them to testify, and the case was overturned in the Supreme Court. They just cited another case. Okay. So then the judge says, and I think so, Mrs. Taylor, you acknowledge the potential risk that your client is in at least response to the request. So there it is, There's some potential balancing there, and certainly Mr. Kohberger doesn't have to say a word, and he's protected by the Constitution of the United States of Idaho. And Idaho. Right there. All right, so I think that takes care of that until now, and we're going to get you into the deadlines. So I think that's the last motion, and again, this motion to dismiss. Bam. That was the testimony. He doesn't have to testify if he doesn't want to. You can get up there and say, I plead the fifth, just like Oliver North, guys, right? We saw that all throughout the media. I mean, if anybody remembers that, I have the right to plead the fifth. I have nothing to say. Okay, so his alibi, he was out driving around. So where was he? We don't know, but he was out driving around. I believe that was truthful and fact-checked. Okay? So when we begin to look at the other hidden secrets and red flags, it takes me to the next video that I made, in case you haven't watched it. We'll watch it real quick so I can talk about this, because this is the most important. This is probably the most, and I'll play it on fast speed so we can get through here real quick. This is probably the most important thing to this whole process. Topic, subject.
Every voice is a weapon, every story be told innocent till proven guilty. That's our final decree. Under this Constitution, we stand forever free. Phoenix in the dawn, truth ignites the sky. Together we stand tall, no more asking why.
Phoenix here, and today we are going to talk about one of the most controversial aspects in the Idaho 4 case. We're not going to talk about the crime itself that happened in November of 2022 in Moscow, Idaho, the brutal murders of 4 off-campus college students from the University of Idaho. No, we are going to talk about how the DNA evidence against Brian Kohberger was sourced. We're going to talk about the technology used, called Investigative genealogy, and how it could change the way law enforcement tracks suspects forever. But here's the one question. Is it ethical? Or does this process chip away at every America's constitutional rights? Stay with me, because what happened here could impact you and your family and your future generations. First, we need to know a little bit about who is Othram and who is David Middleman. Well, let's get into it. According to David's background, he does have background in genetics. He was a research assistant, and they actually studied the Human Genome Project and genetic expression arrays. He was a graduated student from Baylor College, went into postdoctoral fellow, research and development, a professor, associate professor at Virginia Tech, and obviously ventured into more entrepreneurship roles, and eventually today is the founder and chief executive of Othram in Houston, Texas. I'm going to play a clip for you that just took place this weekend to understand a little bit about how this came to be, finding Brian Kohberger's DNA.
We had done work with Idaho State Police prior to this case. We were working on cold cases together and had applied this technology. So they had the knowledge of what this technology was, which I think helped to speed up the use of this technology in this case. But what happened is this was a heinous crime. The entire community was shook. Students didn't want to come back to school. So they were trying to figure out, how can we solve it really quick? They entered the DNA into CODIS, and there was no hit, no match, kind of like David's shirt. And it's unfortunate because up until now, DNA technology is used to confirm identity. And then they had 19,000 leads, no real suspect. So what do you do with that? That's going to take years to shift through to try to figure out, right? And they didn't have years because the community was terrified. Students didn't want to come back to school. People didn't know what to do. Parents didn't want to let their students come back to school. And the entire nation watched on TV daily in terror that this person was still out there. So they contacted us and they asked if we would work this case.
Okay, I know a lot of people were probably going to ask me. I'm going to say it already. What is David's shirt says? It says, let me grab my little magnifying glass. It says, something I wasn't found in CODIS. And then, it looks like some superhero or something. I'm something not in CODIS, but something not in CODIS. I can't read his whole shirt. I just wanted to kind of zoom in on that, but I can't even read what that shirt says. Can anybody see that? Anybody read it? Let's go ahead and go back to the video real quick. Let's see.
And how fast could we create one of these DNA profiles? Is there a way that we could push it into rapid forensic rate genome sequencing? And this is the first case that we worked as rapid forensic rate genome sequencing. David went into some calculations before he called the lab, tried to figure out all the other cases that were on sequencers at the time and what was going on, and said, we can build a profile in a matter of 48 hours. And I flew the DNA down to the Woodlands, Texas, walked through the lab, asked questions, felt comfortable, left the DNA. It was the day before Thanksgiving. And none of us on our team had Thanksgiving that year. We stayed at the lab for 48 hours, building a DNA profile, uploading it to the databases, looking at all the matches, and finally finding the leads that were necessary to identify Brian Kohlberger. I'm certain that there's someone at Thanksgiving with their family last year that wouldn't be if Brian Kohlberger wasn't caught in real time. And I know that I can't say the crime wouldn't have been solved in a few years. I don't know what would have happened, but it wouldn't have been solved in a few days.
There was tons of DNA, by the way. I don't know why it's been reported it was trace DNA. It was not. There was tons of DNA. So there was certainty in the quality of the DNA. There was certainty in the analysis, and there was certainty that there was more than enough information in that tree to get to a person. And so that's what Chris was saying, is that we knew with certainty that that person was going to be picked up and arrested because all the foundational pieces, the quality of the DNA coming in, the profile we built, the trees that were then constructed by both us and also by the Bureau, it was just so much information. It was literally just a matter of time before they, identified the person that they needed to go, contact, and then do, as you saw, the surreptitious collection to confirm that they had the right person.
And you're right. This technology takes you to a family at a certain generation, right? Or someone close to that person. They're not going to take you to, you can't tell between two brothers. In our case, law enforcement has to do that part, the investigating. And so, but yes, David's right. I was certain they were going to get there. It was a matter of time. And it might take 2 weeks, it might take a month, it might take 2 days, but they were going to get there.
Very interesting, to say the least. I mean, I'll summarize. They just said the DNA on the knife sheath was at the crime scene, and it didn't match in CODIS, so investigators turned to this lab to then build a profile. And I believe she said there were 19,000 options, but what they did was go back and basically narrow it down to the vehicle and then the individual. So when Othram built the DNA profile, then the FBI genealogists compare it against public genealogy databases like GED Match. Finally, the law enforcement confirmed by pulling the lead and the discarded Q-tip from Kohlberger's family trash. Family, not the individual. So this just wasn't a single lucky hit in the database. This was a step-by-step process that used private company and genealogy records people never thought would end up in a criminal trial. Why do some say it's unethical? Well, police solved this horrific case with no eyewitnesses. Or did they? Because we're learning today that even though his DNA was on the knife sheath, there is no other DNA to prove that he was in the house or around the crime scene itself. So does IGG crack cold cases? Because we were already into week 7 before his name was given. Now, I will say this. IGG has cracked cold cases like the Golden State Killer. I mean, courts ruled no expectation of privacy in DNA you discard. And that is you discard, not your family discards. And I understand for victims' family, this is justice. For detectives, is this the policing of the future? And legally, do judges have to side with law enforcement? But just because it's legal doesn't mean it's ethical. I mean, if you think about it, why should Americans worry? Genetic privacy. People upload DNA to learn about their ancestry, not to help law enforcement. Relatives of yours can unknowingly implicate family members. Hence, Brian Koberger. You never sign a waiver giving your cousin's DNA to the FBI, but that's what's happening. That is what's happened. So then you have consent issues. The database often is unaware that their data is accessible unless you read the fine print. Even opt-in policies are buried in that tiny little fine print. How many people read the 40-page terms of their services before spitting in a tube? Really, how many? It is a very slippery slope. What if the tech expands beyond violent crimes? What if it can be used in civil cases, insurance disputes, or surveillance for that matter of fact? Once the door is open, history shows it rarely closes again. Have they put Idaho on the map in this case? I mean, let's just think about this for one second. Certain populations who test more often may be disappropriately exposed. It raises questions of equity and fairness issues. And then obviously the main one is the constitutional concerns. Tie ethics to law. The Fourth Amendment protects against unreasonable search and seizure. Yes, Koberger was named, not his father. Critics argue that genealogy databases are a backdoor search without a warrant. Trash pulls may be legal, but collecting personal genetic code raises new questions. I mean, guys, the Constitution was written a long time ago, way before DNA. We've stretched the Fourth Amendment to cover cell phones, laptop, even GPS trackers. But when it comes to the code of who we are individually as humans, the courts haven't caught up. And is this what they're trying to do now with this case in Idaho? What are the real world implications of even developing this process? Let's go beyond Koberger. Future cases could rely mostly entirely on genealogy matches. Innocent people could be flagged just because of their family's DNA. Public trust in privacy erodes. I mean, people are talking about wearing gloves and hats and scarves and donning their full gear to not shed DNA. Would you give law enforcement the permission to look at your family tree? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Would you give law enforcement a permanent key to your family tree? Well, DNA sourcing involved the Idaho 4 case, but it raises some serious ethical questions. I want you to think critically about what we share with companies. Should we suggest lawmakers look into privacy laws? Maybe they need to update them. The Idaho case is not about just one man. This is the way DNA was sourced, and it could affect every American. The line between justice and privacy is razor thin, folks. And we just stepped across it. If your DNA can be used to solve a crime you never committed, then none of us are safe, because justice without privacy is just another prison. Be well. Now, isn't that exactly what happened in this case? Because now we know that his DNA was nowhere else except for that knife sheath. And do you think that they caught the murderer? Here we are again, folks. I've always said technology is not perfect. But here we are. Someone who is factually innocent based on some information they were trying to solve, that he was the unaliver. Now, let's take a look at this. People are asking me, who's Othram? The 21st century forensics. Othram is revolutionizing how forensic cases are solved, justice is served, and families are mended. The only family I see broken in this is not only Koberger's. The truth has been broken. Our justice system is broken. But let me show you one thing I found very interesting about this company. Not only do they solve cold missing persons linked to unidentified human remains and resolve missing person cases, local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies across the United States and that have partnered with Othram. But look at what else they do. There's some recent casework on the missing, which I think is probably necessary on cold cases. But look at what they're pushing, folks. I can't make this shit up. Your DNA, their justice. How can you help? Give me your DNA testing kit. submit a previous test. I am not joking with you folks. This is on their website. This is a service they offer. Not only they are asking you for your DNA, and I don't know why it's taking so long to load, they're also saying, hey, we can help law enforcement solve crimes. And we can actually help you frame a family member or perhaps put an honest, innocent person in prison. Because that is what happened in the Idaho 4 case with Brian Koberger. I'm just spreading awareness, folks. I about pooped my pants when I saw this. Your DNA, their justice. Bring resolution to unsolved cases and answers for victims and their families. A 23andMe on steroids, giving you the authorization to use this DNA, knowing they work and they partner with the federal agencies, local police departments. Guys, I can't make this shit up. And if you aren't pissed off yet, wait till I show you what led to this. Can you believe this? Traditional forensic methods can be shockingly ineffective at solving crimes. But if you, I feel like this should be named Gotham. Right? But we're gonna close that back door. But if you give us your DNA, and we'll test it for $50. If you give us your DNA, we're gonna work with the partners that are gonna throw you behind bars, even if you're innocent. I'm just saying, this is the way to close the gap on that backdoor, unethical, unconstitutional, because if you give it up, you gave up your rights. If you give it to them, they can use it to solve crimes. This is like modern day Batman in the 2153 year. Think about it, guys. We give way too much away of our personal data, our personal social media, our personal records, our phone numbers. I mean, way too much is public record as it is. But now you're going to go and ask, this company is like a catch-22 on a flip side. We want your DNA so that we can solve crimes. If your long-lost uncle in another state commits a crime, we'll be able to locate him easier, even if you don't even know him. But you must accept, yes, Les, you must accept all terms and conditions. Hello, you've reached customer service at Go F Yourself. How can I help you today? Right? Don't get me started on this new credit company that's come out that can help you opt out of getting all these tons of offers. Pre-approve this, pre-approve that. Don't get me started on that company, and please don't get roped into that. I can just go on and on. Now that 23andMe is trying to sell their database, who do you think is going to buy it? I sure hope it's not this company, because I assure you, and I assure probably some of the people in the queue and in the chat have decided, oh my God, I did 23andMe and now they're trying to sell my data. They're trying to sell my DNA. Well, I didn't give it to you to sell it. I gave it to you to investigate my ancestry. Think about this one. Yeah. And then maybe we'll go work with Palantir, and then we'll be able to partner together. Oh, and by the way, maybe we'll go and we'll work with another company, and then we'll have a whole range of offerings that even before you commit a crime, we're going to know it's you. Right? I'm just saying what I see, folks. You can do your research, but it's right here. Not only is your information good to use as a single data point that could help connect adults to solve a crime, but it can reunite you and an unidentified person with their family. Who did the marketing for this, folks? I hope that plenty of people see right through this BS. In my humble opinion, allegedly, I would never sign up for something such as this. And I'm not saying I'm a criminal. I'm just saying nobody in my family has ever committed a crime, thank God. But I'm just saying, you never know. Your long lost Aunt Mary could be a serial killer in the 1980s, and then you'll find out in 2025. Right? All right. So now, to get back to the DNA portion of this, which is really highly sus, right? Drop a 1 if you think all this DNA stuff was just sus. Because we're going to talk about the unethical dilemma in genetic privacy. Huge, huge, huge. What am I talking about? Well, we're going to go all the way back to February 21st, 2025. Remember when there was so much being filed in this case? I couldn't put my finger on it, folks, until I realized all of this. I made a little handy dandy chart. Oh, and I spelled that name wrong. Shoot, hold on a minute. Let me get the right chart. I thought I fixed it. Dang it. Okay. So we'll have to go back. Let's see if this is the right one. Nope. Nope. I guess it didn't fix the spelling. That's okay. So let's go back to November 22nd. This was on a Moscow police report. Yippee! Remember this one, guys? Dustin Blaker? All right. So he basically says, and I'm going to paraphrase this in a nutshell for you. Basically, I jumped in my car, drove all the way down to Meridian at the Idaho State Police Laboratory. I picked up the chain of custody DNA from the knife sheet that was collected, got on an airplane, and I flew into Othram at Houston, and I basically handed it over to them. This was the DNA on the knife sheet. Okay. This was the document that I was just reading from. That was the MPD sequence number 93. 93. 93. And by chance, do you see the date of this report? 1/4/23. He waited almost a year and a few months to write this report that he traveled all the way down there at this time. Not surprising. Not surprising at all. But wait, there's more. So much more. So the transcript of pain, I don't know if you guys remember this one, but I'm here to share it with you. Let's freaking go. Let me blow this up for you. Okay. So this is a transcript from the 21st in regards to a hearing on January 23rd, 25 at 9 a.m. This is a certified transcript. And when I look at my little handy dandy chart, let me pull it up for you. We are going to look at transcript page 9, line 6 in regards to the FBI reference. Okay? Let's read this real quick. So let me see, page 6, line 9. Is that 9? Okay, hold on a minute. I think it was page 9. Hold on. I'm trying to squeeze this in here so you guys can see this whole thing. So let me go to page 9. Here it is. Okay. So Brett Payne is on the stand, and Taylor's asking questions about, okay, did you participate in a search for a suspect? Yes, ma'am. Brett Payne stated. And when was the first time you heard Bryan Kohberger's name? The first time I heard Bryan Kohberger's name was December 19th, 2022. And what was the result of it? Well, the result was an investigative genetic genealogy. Bam. That was being undertaken by the FBI. Wait, the FBI? Wait a minute. What? Hold on one second. Didn't I just show you this document right here that said that Blaker flew it down to Othram on the 22nd of November? Am I not like, wait a minute here. Let's just take a step back. He said in January of 23, at this hearing, the first time that he heard of Kohberger's name was on the 19th of December, 2022. That's the first time he heard of the name. And it came from the FBI. Okay, because later on in here, you're going to see the question asked. And before that, Mr. Kohberger was not on your radar? No, ma'am. Before December 19th? Was the FBI CAS team member co-located with you? Yes, ma'am. How long had you been co-located with you? I don't remember exactly, but it had been several weeks at that point. And that was Nicholas Balance? Yes, ma'am. What other FBI team members were co-located with you? Goodness, a lot. We had yada, 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 and yada, and yada. By the time it was December 19th, this is Taylor asking him, by the time it was December 19th and you first heard of Bryan Kohberger's name, had you reviewed videotapes? Yes, ma'am. How many hours of videotapes do you think you reviewed? I don't remember. A lot. I can't give you the accurate representation. All right. Anne says, in those videotapes, did you focus on any particular ones that were of interest to you? Yes, ma'am. In particularly, we would be the blank talking about the address that were there. How would you like me to refer to them? And then she said, you nicknamed the cameras? And he responds. So the first one was from 1122 King Road. It was a surveillance camera, an exterior surveillance camera on a house that was immediately to the north of 11 King Road. There was some footage from Linda Lane camera. I forgot the address on the top of my head. There was some footage from A&W, which is on the corner of Louder and South Main, which I just showed you in the video prior to this. You guys remember that? Okay. Or Highway 95. There was footage from an address on Indian Hills. Okay. But a lot of these statements, and I'll go back and point them out. A lot of these statements, the homeowners said there was no footage. There was no one there at the time that somebody called in a tip to the ISP. They went out and investigated, and they found out, no, in fact, this individual that said that they had something at the back of the other side of the house, that their lake, that nobody went into their driveway. Right here, I'll show you. Right here. It says the pond at the end of the driveway had been frozen over before the homicides, which occurred on November 13th, 22. Neither he nor blank and I deserved anything like it was reported in the tip. So this tip was on supplement 147 right here. See it? 147. Hopefully you guys can see this. And it basically said, we got a tip, and it basically, the FBI tip was an email serial number 9207 and indicated a female resident had identified the male and observed the male matching the description of Kohberger. So when they went out to investigate, they basically found it wasn't true, and that was in Jeunesse. So they said that there was a sighting of Kohberger in the early morning following the homicides of all four of these individuals. After advising the purpose of my contact, he provided me the following. Him and his wife were the only residents at this address. He knew all his neighbors and didn't know of anyone named blankety blank. The residence is in a rural area with very few neighboring residences. The neighbors shared a driveway where blank and their addresses were confirmed in the information on their mailbox and the Idaho driver's license. Nor he nor blank observed anything like what was reported in the tip. So who's calling in these fake FBI tips? Hello? What in the Moscow is going on out there? So he said there was also footage from Ridge Road camera, and that's where we referred to them. It was basically by those names. So they're over here saying that they've seen him. ISP goes out and inquires with the residents, and some people are like, nope, nothing happened like that here. What are you talking about? Okay. Now, Ann Taylor says, with those references in mind and keep December 19th in mind, which of those cameras were you focused on before learning of Koberger's name? Well, let's go back to this document one time again, because this tip came in 2/13/2023. This is one of the biggest tips, right? That was from the FBI, a tip number 9207. It didn't pan out. Okay. So we go back to the document and it says, I would say all of them were important before that. She's trying to get it out of them where they got the name. And here's the big one. And it was later that the other cameras became important. Is that right? Those were the main ones we relied upon for vehicles in particular, is what those ones were. Anne says, I'm going to return that to you in just a minute, but I want you to talk about interviews. And then she gets into it. She says, did you interview any people in relationship to the case before December 19th? Yes, ma'am. And did other officers interview people? Yes, ma'am. Were some of those people the roommates of the people at 1122 King? Yes, ma'am. Now wait for it. Did you review other officers' work as well? Yes, ma'am. Did you have any other regular meetings with other officers about the status of the investigation? Yes, ma'am. Do you have any role in deciding to pursue investigative genealogy, basically genetic genealogy? Yes, ma'am. It was a collaborated decision among the command teams to go that route. But yes, I was a part of that. Now wait 1 minute here. Wait 1 minute. This hearing was on January 2023. This document right here, Blaker puts in the system that they flew down to Othram. I don't see any FBI involvement in this report. He flew it right to Othram. They're saying that they're blaming the FBI for it. And the FBI is like, what? Right? It was a collaborative decision amongst the command team that we go that route. Well, wait a minute here. Not only are you telling me that Blaker flew it down on November 22nd, 2022, and here we're sitting here in January of 2023 in a court hearing, and you're saying that it came from the FBI, this genetic genealogy thing that was part of it. And not only on top of that, you're basically throwing the FBI under the bus. What? Now, mind you, this was the 22nd. He took it on the 21st out of the ISP lab. They got it on November 13th. 8 days later, they decide to take it to Othram, flying down there. And so for, let me see, 13th, it was taken out. And there's probably some chain of custody. I'm not going to say that they delayed. But from 11/22 to January 23, they already knew that they took it down there. He knew they flew down there, dropped it off. So he says, yes, ma'am, it was a collaborative decision among the command team to go that route. I was a part of that. In just a matter of 8 days? Is this like, what? And she says, were you a part of that decision during the process of identification? Yes, ma'am. Were you aware that Othram Labs began the work on the investigative genealogy? Yep, he did. Yes, ma'am. What kinds of information did you receive from Othram? Don't remember. That was received from Othram directly. I don't remember. I knew they were conducting their specific type of work. I don't remember exactly what they provided for us. Well, you guys do know that they were not accredited, correct? Does anybody understand that? I'll have to maybe go through that at a later date. But they allegedly weren't authorized to do this type of work. So, alleged. So then she says, did you receive some documents from them? Yep. How many? I don't know. And then he goes on to say there were thousands of documents, right? And this is where it gets really good. Because they say, as a collaborative discussion, we decided that because the Idaho State Lab and Othram had essentially exhausted their resources. They exhausted their resources in 8 days, that they had to go ahead and determine they would go another route. That we would move it to the FBI because they had more resources available to pursue this particular avenue. That's a lie because they just flew it down to Othram themselves. I didn't see any chain of custody given to the FBI. What the heck is going on in Toledo, guys? Do you know what more resources the FBI had? The only thing I'm privy to is that there were more databases that could be compared to the sample. That was the extent of my knowledge. Okay. What database does Othram already have if they are a semi-new startup company that are now collecting DNA? Anyone? I mean, how much possible DNA do they have in their database that sounds like they could have done the job the better than the FBI? I mean, you do realize the FBI has access to more genetic material and obviously more criminal records, in my humble opinion. I mean, what do I know? But I'll continue reading this document because it gets even better. So then she says, do you have any familiarity with databases and the rules that applies to those? No, ma'am. I'll save those questions. What was your communications with the FBI about IgG? So in our communications, we were just via telephone. The sample was sent to the FBI. I don't remember the date it was given over to them. But after, that's where they had a few conversations that it happened at all. They were just telephonic, advising us that the process was still in the works and they would let us know, or if they had anything else of interest for us. Oh, dear God. Dear Lord. What in the world? What in the world is going on? Do you know what files or documents went to the FBI from Othram? I don't remember. Did you receive documents from the FBI in relation to the IgG? Yes. I believe after the fact. After we received Koberger's name, we did receive documents, but don't remember what they were. Oliver North, I don't recall. Bye, Caleb. We'll see this later. We'll see you later. Do you know how many documents related to the IGG you received from the FBI? Nope, don't believe it. It was thousands of pages. Well, she wanted to know more. So the only thing that was given to us, he says, was Brian Koberger's name. What was it? It was conveyed to us by the FBI that it was used to be taken more as a tip. As a tip. Then they say they were working with secondary FBI teams. Okay? And then they go down a little bit more about the suspect, identifying as a suspect. And they said, well, it was the night of the 19th and then into the 20th. And then they talk about the working document, the PCA. And then he gets into, all right, she asked, you pursued interviews and surveillance video. Have you pursued evidence found inside of the King Street address? Yeah. What efforts did you make to pursue unknown male B? And then this is where it gets elusive. You have to be more specific. I don't remember exactly where unknown male B came from. Well, if I told you the lab report showed unknown male B came from a blood spot on the handrail going between the second and the first floor, does that help jog your memory? And he says, yes, ma'am. Why did you not pursue that person? And then he goes on to say, at that point in time, we already hadn't received Mr. Koberger's name. And from what my understanding was, entering another DNA profile into CODIS would remove the previous one we had from the knife sheath. So if memory serves, the discussion was, we'll hold off. We'll stay with the one from the knife sheath. If we need to, we can address the unknown male B at a later time. So do you think that they have basically addressed unknown male B now? Do you think that they addressed it? Probably not. But in my humble opinion, that's what I think. And then Anne says, I want to make sure I understand your testimony. Were you not aware that unknown male B until after December 19th when you knew Koberger's name? No, ma'am, I was aware of that before. Well, how about unknown male D? Again, you're going to have to be more specific. If I told you unknown male D came from a lab report from a sample of blood on some gloves outside the house, does that refresh your memory? Oh, yes, ma'am, it does. You're aware of that too? Yes, ma'am. And then she says, I want to back up and talk about the affidavits. I think you told me in a prior hearing that you were the person that wrote Exhibit A or the affidavit in support of the search warrants when it came to looking for the things about Brian Koberger. Do I understand that that's right? He says, yes, I began that on December 23rd to get records. Well, essentially, somebody else claimed it to be theirs, and I think it was somebody on the FBI team, right? And there's some things that happen in between here. And then she wants to get back. She said basically that they went and they looked at the pullover from Corporal Duke on Koberger on the traffic stop. His vehicle was ran by WPD officers. That's what they concluded. And then the Pennsylvania component part of it. And then she says, let's go back before the traffic stop. The affidavit contains some information that you gained from other officers. Isn't that right? Yes, ma'am. And you didn't write large parts of that affidavit. Is that right? I took language from the experts and other officers and agents. That's correct. And then she said, you are aware your affidavit, a living document, was claimed by other people as their own document, not giving you credit, but claimed as their own. Are you aware of that? Yes, ma'am. Are you aware that you probably know Nick Balance was collocated with you? Did you know two of you continually work on language to satisfy the prosecutor wanted to see for probable cause? Yes, ma'am. Did you and Nick Balance produce a map to show possible route of travel for your suspect? Yes, ma'am. And then, Your Honor, I met defendant 1A, which is a map, okay? And then she goes down and they have some tit-tat back and forth with the court. And then she puts up the map and she says, is this the map that you and Nick Balance came up with for the probable cause? Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I'm going to leave it just for a moment. And then the AT&T records. Yes, ma'am. I believe so, related to Mr. Koberger's phone. Okay. Yes, ma'am. And this is where it gets good. This is the Phoenix fireball. And then I'm done for the night. She says, all right. And in doing so, this affidavit, you have this working document, and I'm going to start with DM. If I say DM, do you know who I'm talking about? And he responds, yes, ma'am, I do. And Miss Taylor, she says, and she is one of the roommates. Is that right? And then the court, the judge, says, we're sealed. You can use the name. Miss Taylor says, I can use the name, trying to get a habit. Mrs. Taylor redacted. Who is she? She is one of the surviving roommates. And how many times was blank interviewed before law enforcement at the time you wrote this December 23rd report? If memory serves, it was 4, I think 3 or 4. In the affidavit, you wrote a statement that she heard Kaylee going upstairs, yell, someone's here, and run back down the stairs. Is that correct? Yes, ma'am. And you use the words she thought she heard. Do you remember that? And the state stands up and says, Your Honor, I'm going to object. I'm objecting based on the scope of what this testimony is supposed to be. My understanding, it was limited solely to the issue of Franks and IGG. And Judge Hippler says, I was just about to ask the question. I don't recall the statements of blank being a subject of the motion to suppress separate from the Franks issue. Am I correct about that? Ms. Taylor says, that is correct, Your Honor. Then the court says, okay, we're at a Franks hearing on that issue. The only issue that we're at a Franks hearing is on the IGG. And then Ms. Taylor says, all right, well, let me rephrase that and start from a different place. The court says, I'll sustain the objection, Mrs. Taylor. She says, let's go to your part on the affidavit for December 23rd, AT&T 1, the part where you put in particular things to Brian Koberger. You put in the affidavit a traffic stop, I believe from August in Moscow. Is that correct? Yes, ma'am. That traffic stop was on your radar before December 19th, when you learned of Koberger's name. And Payne says, no, ma'am. He says, the next thing you relied on was a traffic stop at WSU. Is that right? Yes, ma'am. And she says, was that traffic stop on your radar before you knew of the name Brian Koberger on December 19th? He says, no, ma'am. And then she says, you put information about front license plate being missing from Pennsylvania cars. Is that right? Yes, ma'am. And then she says the 1112 video did not show enough of the vehicle that you could see whether it had a front license plate. Is that right? That sounds correct. Yes. So if you think that that was Brian Koberger's car driving around in that area, then you deserve a clown horn that I don't have, So, wonk, wonk, wonk. There you go. He says, that sounds correct. So after you learned of Brian's Koberger's name, that became part of your affidavit. Is that right? Yes, ma'am. Let's talk about the vehicle identification for a minute before I run down through the rest of the affidavit after Brian was identified. When you worked with Special Agent Emil to identify the vehicle, was there more than one vehicle he identified? I don't believe there was. If memory serves, it was just the Hyundai Elantra. But whose Hyundai Elantra? Remember, there were thousands of them in this area. And that's what the point she was trying to get to. She said, would you agree that he was most comfortable with the years 2011 to 13? And then Ms. Jennings objects, Your Honor, for the same reason. I don't understand the scope related to IGG. See, Taylor already opened the door and got some information out of him before they could object. Your Honor, I'm going to ask for a little leeway on this one. I think it'll be clear about in 2 more questions. It is a sealed proceeding. I'll be arguing it at Frank's. I don't want to pollute the record. And then she says there was a bench conference. I guess they called her up there, slap on the hand. Then she gets back and she says, they looked for 2011 to 2013. It was their bolo. Remember the confidential bolo I shared with you guys on my post on my YouTube? If you don't know, you can go back to the post and you can see the bolo, the confidential bolo that was said, do not release this to anyone. This is only for internal purposes. And let me just show you real quick. They had marked it confidential, not to share externally. This is the kicker. This is one of the few things that I was like, you've got to be kidding me. And that came out in the Pullman documents with Moscow being tied to it because they were running the investigation. And in this one, the bolo, here it is. This bolo right here. It's on my post. It says, this is a white 2001 to 2000 Hyundai Elantra. They were very confident at that time. All right. They were very confident that this was the vehicle. Do not stop it. Do not stop the vehicle or make any contact with the driver. Do not. This is confidential. Do not distribute. Law enforcement sensitive. And then he says, they looked for a 2011 to 13. It was their bolo. If it was after Brian was identified, the IGG expanded the search. And then the judge says, relates to what? I'm going to relate it to Frank's, but it has to do with the IGG when they identified him. I have about 2 more questions along this line. And then the court says, you have to separate Frank's motion from the scope of the car search. And she says, absolutely. And she says, but that's not, the court said, that's not what we're here today for. This is Hippler talking. We're here for the IGG. I get the idea that if the IGG is suppressed, the warrants based on IGG is suppressed. That affects a lot of other things, right? But I don't think you need to be getting into evidence at this point because of the Franks. There's separate motions on that. She says there absolutely is. And she says the next question I'm going to get into the affidavit after the IGG was the police in Pullman running the car that has laid it out in the affidavit after the IGG stating without it. And so I'm doing the IGG part now with him. That car is a different year than the one the bolo is for. That's as far as I'm going with the car at this hearing. And then Miss Jennings says, I don't understand what this has to do with IGG. Well, if they didn't have the right car and they didn't know where they got Koberger's name, how could you do the IGG? They were essentially piecing it together backwards, right? But you can't pull the cart before the horse. It doesn't work that way. So at that point, she wanted to understand the timeline. But they were saying that the point had already been made, but it hadn't been made. And she said, this is when I was allowed to explore this witness since he's already here and we've paid him to come here. And then the court, Hippler, said, yeah, but I didn't open up everything to the Franks because we couldn't get into all the other things. And she says, Taylor just says IgG flows. It makes everything. And then the judge interrupts her, right? And he says, I'm not suggesting we get into other Franks issues that sprung in part from IgG because those are separate based, right? And so I think all we need to keep talking about is the IgG stuff in terms of Franks. And she's basically saying to suppress, which I'm not following. I'm sorry. She says there are motions to suppress that the Franks are not related. This is what Hippler kept saying. She said, right, I'm not going there. And he says, that's evidence we can put on today, but I thought we were going to do it later today. He keeps trying to push her out. Like, don't talk about it. We'll get to it later. There's various motions, right? They want to stick on to just the genetic genealogy. And so then Taylor goes back and says all the things in the warrant that became particular to Brian Kohberger, his identity through IgG, is that correct? And then Payne says yes. And you elected to not to put the IgG identification in your probable cause affidavit. Is that right? Yes, ma'am. What led to that decision? That was a collaborative decision that we made the decision in an effort to independently verify the information that was provided us as a tip from the FBI. Much as the same way we would get any other tip in law enforcement. So it was not only in any way meant to be the only information that was given, but simply we could validate Mr. Kohberger's involvement with this incident, or we cannot. That was it. And then she says, she grills him, as a group effort, you decided intentionally to leave that out of your affidavit? Yes, ma'am. And then she says, given the limitation at this point, I think that's all my questions. All right, cross-examination. So basically, in a nutshell, the minute that Anne started talking about the individual DM, the judge pulls it back and says, no, we're going to stick to the IgG. You can go and read this. This is a pretty long document. There's 175 pages, but it's very interesting. It's very interesting. Some of his answers check out. Some of them are kind of suspicious. But I will say some shady stuff and hidden secrets and red flags are in this document. Has anyone been able to read this? Anyone at all? Yeah, which came first, the chicken or the egg? And it's kind of alarming in this document right here, this whole file. If you get a chance to download it and go through it, I mean, I can give you some more hidden secrets and highlights, but the gist of it is right in here. They were out to get Kohberger. And I don't, in my humble opinion, I don't believe that this tip came from any organization other than somebody that they interviewed and someone had recommended them to look into him. In my humble opinion. What are your thoughts? Drop them below. I know it's been a long live. I know there's other creators that are live. I lost track of time. Folks, I apologize. But we will be back talking about the hidden secrets and red flags. And make sure you watch my next video in regards to the genetic portion of the Idaho 4. Thank you so much, Misinformation. We love you guys. Take care. Be well.
No more hidden verdicts, no more secrets solved. Every voice is a weapon. Every story be told, innocent till proven guilty. That's our final decree. Under this constitution we stand forever free. Phoenix in the dawn, truth ignites the sky. Together we stand tall, no more asking why.